welcome to the video. I'm going to be reviewing the book Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Um, yeah, the book starts with the sentence, "It was a pleasure to burn." Now, first of all, leave this video now if you don't want the book spoiled for yourself, but if you don't really care about that, I'd just continue watching. And I hope you can follow along with what I'm saying. So, first of all, the characters of the book are Guy Montag. He's curious, questions his job as a firefighter at times, and finds his life quite dull. Now, a firefighter in Fahrenheit 451 burns books instead of, or burns instead of puts out fire instead of putting out fires. And the reason why I like this character is, first of all, he questions the world he lives in and actively, after he's aware of the world being different than what it is, he decides to ask around about that. He cares about the people he lives with, like his wife, even if his wife is non-present and always not there, and he isn't always watching the instantaneous content that's omnipresent. There's always something going on, and he isn't entirely persuaded by that and doesn't watch it that often. Then we have Mildred Montag, the wife of Guy Montag, and she doesn't really think about doing stuff. She just does things without thinking. Excited about whatever new, and she's also excited about whatever new show shows up on the three TV wall screens that they have. And she cares about her fictional family, which is just a figment of generated content, and has a small friend group, and that friend group talks about talks about whatever they're watching. And as you can see in the image, she is constantly listening to the radio with the precursor or an idea of Bluetooth headphones. And I like this character because she's basically the polar opposite of Guy Montag, and she shows the average person inside the dystopian world, and shows the amount of conviction that everyday people have in that book when it comes to books are bad, everything else is good, but books are bad. You'll see why later. And then we have Clarice McClellan, a 17-year-old who is always talking about how messed up the world is and how she perceives it. And yeah, she just goes on about how she she doesn't really think of them as friends, but people of her own age group are always dying. She constantly talks about that, and she looks up to her grandfather, who told her about how the world was before everything happened with the book burning and the constant war and the we don't care what happens to other people part of the book. And walks with Montag and makes him question what 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 kind of world he is actually living in. I like this character because she represents the rather curious youth who ask questions in a time where people are not supposed to ask questions, and she also pushes the adults in the book, in this case Montag, to change their viewpoint of the world and therefore finding a way to get out of that viewpoint. And her pattern is, the way she talks is, at least in the book, very well done. I have not seen the two movies, the movie and the TV show that came out, but I can perceive that from the book. And then we have Captain Beatty. Uh, he's the captain of the firefighters, so Montag's boss. He also likes collecting books, although he never reads them because he wants to stay within the law. And his backstory is basically when when the whole uh, law about having to burn books showed up, he was the first one to burn books in the library, and he'll participate in that. And he he collects books, but never reads them, and just keeps them locked away from the entire world. And he is set up to be the main antagonist of the book. And what do I like about this character? Well, he he basically, by the end of the book, Montag realizes that Captain Beatty wants to die. He represents kind of the authoritative figure of the whole story of the dystopian world, and gives authority a picture. So he basically gives the reader someone to dislike, an antagonist, if you will, and visualizes the face of what keeps a dystopian world world that is devoid of books. Then, lastly, the last character that I'll be kind of representing or showing on screen is Faber. He's rather old, but he still wants to do something about the issues with the world and the constant book burning and whatnot. But he is also too fearful to actually do anything about it, so he just lives off the radar, and his he doesn't really seem to have any friends, and so when Montag meets him, they're basically friends just out of necessity, and because Montag wants to read. Which comes to what I like about this character, and that he kind of shows the older, frightened generation who grew up in a time where books were allowed, but don't really want to do anything about the way the system was built up. And in the end of the book, he still helps Montag get away from uh, the authorities after Montag kills Captain Beatty, and he's just kind of like he's silently revolting against the government who set up the book burning process by building radios and by keeping books hidden from everyone who could possibly report him to so, so the books don't get burned. And now to the overall plot of the book. And so the plot starts off with Guy Montag. Um, he's burning books after a call came in about them. And on his way home from his job, he runs into Clarice, and Clarice talks to him, makes him question if he's happy or not. And then by the time he gets home, he notices that he walks into his room and notices that his wife had overdosed on sleeping pills. But luckily, inventions have come far enough that the pills could be pumped out of her stomach with relatively no consequences whatsoever, aside from feeling like you haven't eaten in several weeks. So by the time morning rolls around, Mildred acts as if nothing happened and continues on her life as if there was as if she didn't overdose by pills. And yeah, over the course of a week, Clarice still talks to Montag and continues giving him ideas, which leads to Montag talking with his captain, who who kind of paints the backstory of how books were banned and how books are bad for the society that they live in, and paints an overall picture of why they burn books. And to show that, he pulls out a book and reads from it and says Benjamin Franklin was the first firefighter to burn books, which is historically inaccurate, but because there are no books to check history, it's just kind of accepted as a fact, and everyone goes along with it, which kind of shows the whole reason why we need books and why we need to have history. And then Montag's life goes on when they get a call about an old woman who has been hoarding books. Now, that old woman lives in a house that is not fireproofed, and basically, the dystopian world that this book is taking place in, the houses are all built out of material that doesn't burn. But this one old woman has a house that is made completely out of wood, so when they go to burn the books, they'll also burn down the entire property. And Montag helps douse the house in kerosene, helps to find all the books, and in doing so, he kind of takes them home with him. And as he's leaving the house, the old woman kind of convinces him to read by showing her complete devotion to her books and showing that she doesn't want to see anyone else destroy them but her. So in doing so, she awakens the curiosity in Montag to read because he has never read before and he's wondering what's so great about books that would make an old woman decide to light herself and her house in the process on fire. And he starts reading. Everything's going along fine. And then Captain Beatty shows up later, noticing that Montag is calling in sick, and Montag never does that. And he gives him a talk about how firefighters are allowed to keep a book for a day, but has to turn them back in. And kind of tells Montag that he himself was curious about books, but he never really cared about. He decided to never open them, and yeah, he just leaves it at that. So Montag keeps the books for a few days, longer than he's supposed to have them, and decides to go seek out an old man named Faber, who gives him a radio, and they kind of help each other. Montag gives Faber the courage uh, help Montag to help gather information about the firefighters and how to fix the problems. And Faber gives Montag more ideas and more reasons why books are important, and hands him a radio so they can keep in contact. Then Montag heads home, and when he gets home, he notices that his wife is sitting in the living room with a bunch of her friends, and they're talking about who they want to vote in for president, and Montag jumps in and starts wondering about what they're talking about, and then Montag gets an idea and grabs a book from one of the hiding spots and reads a poem to them, upsetting Mildred and all her friends, which leads to Mildred calling Captain Beatty on her husband. And that leads to Captain Beatty forcing Montag to help burn down all his possessions and the books that he collected in his house. Well, at the same time, his wife leaves him and goes to live in a hotel, which I'll come back to later. And yeah, Montag, after being pushed constantly, and after Captain Beatty after Captain Beatty sticks a mechanical hound after Montag, Guy Montag decides to just light Captain Beatty on fire And after doing so, he realizes that Captain Beatty actually wanted to die, and not just and wasn't afraid of dying. And so Montag just runs off away from the authorities and goes to Faber for help, and Faber offers him some advice and hands Montag some vodka and a suitcase and whatnot. And Montag just runs off and hides in the river, which the mechanical hound can't follow him into, and they lose the scent. And Granger, a homeless person wandering around on the outskirts of the city, someone kicked out of society, kind of lays out the future that is in store for Montag because he's out of the city, and they show him the rest of the whole chase scene played out from the perspective of a police helicopter. And that scene shows a random person being picked up from the streets and murdered, and that just being passed off as that was Montag. And it's impossible to tell if that was actually Montag or not. And after the whole chase scene's over, they hear bombs going off in the city, which leads to Mildred's death, and possibly Faber's and several other people's deaths. And now to my thoughts about the book. First of all, is the book any good? Yes, it is. And what makes it so good? The book has similarities with the present. It has timeless quality because of that, and constant readability. Is still seen as a very good book and very applicable to the present and the future, and has very easily understood characters. You can kind of tell where each character is coming from and their perspective. Then, yeah, the book was also kind of ahead of its time. It predicted a ton of inventions like Bluetooth headphones. Those are mentioned as shell radios. Headphones shaped in the form of a shell, but it was kind of a precursor to Bluetooth headphones. And then short form content. The large video screens in that book just showed constant short form videos and constantly showed some nonsensical thing, which if you took it to today's society and compared that with the short form content that we have, it seems almost like Ray Bradbury just kind of looked ahead and saw what was going to happen. And then the book also keeps the reader engaged with the plot. There's never really a moment where you think, oh, this is boring. I don't want to watch this anymore, or I don't want to continue reading this. There's never a point to that. It's just, you just keep on reading until you're done with it. And then you wonder what's next. Now, I would recommend this book further. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and drop a book recommendation in the comments if you have any. And I'll probably make a review of them sooner or later. And yeah, have a good day.